Welcome to the Friendly Podcast Guide, sorting through podcasts so you don't have to. I'm Andy Smiley, and I want to help you discover the right podcast without having to listen to an entire episode. Now, let's talk podcasts. Hello, and welcome back to the Friendly Podcast Guide. Today we are talking about Sex for Saints with host Amanda Louder, and I think you are going to enjoy this episode. She is very fun to talk to, and it was fun to hear why she started the podcast and why she keeps making it. But before we dive into my conversation that I had with Amanda, I wanted to give you some of the details about the show. The show description is, as a certified sex and marriage coach and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Amanda Louder helps conservative Christian women love their sex life. The length of each episode is about 10 to 20 minutes, and her disclaimer about little ears at the beginning of every episode is, while this podcast isn't rated explicit, the content may not be suitable for young listeners. The show is ongoing and is available every Friday. Before we dive into my conversation with Amanda, I wanted to take a quick break to talk about the Friendly Podcast Guide on Instagram. If you would like more Friendly Podcast Guide goodness in your life, you can join us over there on Instagram at Friendly Podcast Guide. I get to share behind the scenes stuff about putting the episodes together and some fun stories that don't always make the final cut for the episodes. I can't wait to connect with you over there. Now we get to hear from Amanda about her podcast and why some of her favorite episodes are the controversial ones. And one more little disclaimer, we will be talking about this podcast, which is about sex, so it may not be suitable for young listeners. Here is my conversation with Amanda. Amanda, I am so excited to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Andy. It's so fun to be here.
Can you tell me, I want to know why you decided to start your podcast and why you keep making it.
So my podcast is actually the biggest way for me to get clients. So that's really why I started it. I am a certified life coach, and I specialize in helping conservative Christian women have a great sex life. And so that's why I continue making it, because I get to talk about sex all day, every day, and it's a lot of fun. And I love what it does for the people who listen. It has literally transformed women's lives and marriages. And so that's why I keep making it, because I keep getting clients from it, which is awesome. But I also hear from people all the time about how much it has changed their life.
I love that. I listened to one of your episodes. I think it was Sexual Energy, something like that, about yin and yang. Yes. And totally, I'd never thought about it. I'd never thought about different energies bringing different things to sex. I loved that. I loved that idea. Yeah. So I feel like you just touched on it, but can we dive in a little bit more of what do you want people to get out of your podcast?
Yeah. So I think a lot of times as conservative Christians, we don't get a very good education on sex. And a lot of times we have a lot of fear around sex and fear of what we will run into if we try to find things out about sex. You know, we're reluctant to Google something because we don't want to bring up porn. And so I wanted to be a really good resource for Christian women so that they can learn everything that they need to learn about sex to have a great sex life, but also make it safe for them to listen. And it's something that's within their value system. So I literally talk about everything when it comes to sex, but I do it in a way that is in alignment with my Christian values. So it's not crass, it's not vulgar. I'm not using swear words, but they're learning everything that they need to learn.
Nice. Okay. And on that note, so one of the things that I tell my listeners is if it's kid ear friendly, and I feel like
it's not.
Okay. That's what I needed to know.
And I do put that disclaimer at the beginning of every episode. Like, we are talking about things that are for adult ears. Like, my podcast isn't explicit, but it is probably not suitable for younger listeners.
Sure. If you're not ready to have that conversation with your kids, put in the headphones.
Yes.
Love that. Okay. So what would you consider the vibe of your show, or like the feeling, or how would someone else describe your show?
Yeah. A lot of people tell me it's like listening to their best friend who just knows everything. So that's really kind of who I am. I'm just really open and friendly, but I have so much knowledge and I love to just impart all of that knowledge to the people that I talk to and my listeners.
Perfect. Tell me a little bit more. I forgot to ask you this earlier about your coaching. So where did you get certified or licensed or how do you, I don't know the correct term.
Yeah. I am a certified life coach. So life coaching is not a regulated industry. So anyone can literally call themselves a life coach, but I was certified through the life coach school in certain methods of coaching. But then I'm also doing a second certification right now in love, relationship, and sex coaching specifically. So it's a year-long 650-hour master's type program, really, really in depth. And so I'm going through all of that right now because I was finding like mindset's really awesome. And so much of sex is about the mindset and the brain, but sex is also about the body. And I've found that a lot of people have a lot of trauma around sex, and not necessarily like big T trauma, like, abuse or rape or something like that. But we all have little T trauma just with how we were raised in our families, in our religion, and just in society around sex. And so it's this certification is more trauma informed so that I can be a better coach in helping my clients who are experiencing trauma as well as other things in the sexual realm.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense. And good for you. Holy cow. That is a lot of hours.
It is a lot of hours. It's about 15 to 20 hours a week. So it's a lot on top of the coaching that I'm already doing, but I've been coaching for almost 4 years. So, I have a lot of experience. I've been podcasting for almost 4 years as well. So we're coming up on episode 200 pretty quick here.
That's awesome. I can't wait to be able to say that about my podcast someday.
Someday. I know it'll take a while, but it's so fun. It's really a new podcast every single Friday for almost 4 years is pretty awesome. And so there's so much content and so many different things to listen to. Like you can literally go through and find just about anything when it comes to sex.
That's quite the accomplishment. That's awesome. So out of those almost 200 episodes, do you have a favorite or a couple favorites that you could share with us?
Oh my gosh. Like it's so hard to pick because I feel like every single one is my favorite, or like my latest one is always my favorite. I thought about like which one I would say. And there's a couple that are probably the most popular and they also are kind of my favorites because usually the ones that are the most popular are kind of the ones that are the most controversial.
Sure.
And so I kind of like that. So my number one podcast is episode 134 called Masturbation and the Church, because we don't talk about masturbation. And I kind of talk about it in a very different way than you've probably ever heard before. And it's one that I did a ton of research on, and it is probably the one that I get the most comments on that it changed their life. So that was another one. The second one, which was super fun, is episode 164, and it's called Oral Sex Hangups, because nobody talks about oral sex, but I do.
Sure. Well, I'm glad someone does, right?
Yes.
I feel like, yes, you are like the best friend that talks about everything and helps people understand what's going on.
Yep. I will literally tell you whatever you need to know. And if I don't know, then I will find out so I can do a podcast episode about it.
I love that. Okay. I will make sure to link those episodes in the show notes so that people can jump to them automatically and hear all of the controversial stuff.
Right. So much fun.
Oh, I love that. And tell me where can people find you?
Yeah. So you can follow me on social media, Instagram, Facebook at Amanda Louder Coaching. My website is amandalouder.com, and you can learn all about my coaching, and I do retreats a couple times a year and all sorts of fun stuff. I have some courses as well. So all of that's on my website. And of course, on my podcast, which is called Sex for Saints.
Perfect. I do love that name.
Me too.
It's fabulous. The alliteration is my favorite. Well, thank you so much for talking about your podcast and letting me get to know you a little bit better.
Thanks for having me, Andy.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want to hear more about podcasts, please follow or subscribe on your podcast app of choice. And remember to join us on Instagram at Friendly Podcast Guide to get more behind the scenes content and to actually see my face. Talk to you soon. Hello and welcome back to the Friendly Pod. Okay, you gotta be super quiet, okay?